Okay, we should be live. So, what I wanted to do was just jump on a live stream quickly because I'm working on something in Statamic at the moment, and it is an area that's not really that well documented. So, rather than write up a blog post or something like that, I just wanted to do a quick video, show how I personally tackle problems when there isn't any documentation. And really the key to that is being able to read source code. Now, within Statamic, that is in the Statamic folder, as you probably wouldn't be surprised to discover. A couple of things. Really, you need to have a fairly good understanding of Laravel. You definitely need a good understanding of object-oriented PHP, and you probably need a good understanding of Statamic as well. If you don't have that, you'll still probably be able to follow along with the video, but you won't necessarily get as much out of it. So just to explain what I'm working on at the moment we are rebuilding our investors website. And a big part of that is that it has a series of announcements. They can be things like share change or changes in the amount of people who own shares, people selling shares, people buying shares, sort of like annual or quarterly reports that need to be released. All of these things have fixed titles that they have to have. We can't really change the titles that are used, and I ran into an issue with the way that collections are structured within Statamic, where you can't have two entries in the collection with the same title. There's a way around that if you use duplicate, but it's not really the best workflow for the people who will be using it. So instead, after looking through how to try and manipulate the slug and a couple of things, settled on using Statamic's custom form publishing or custom publish form functionality. Now, this is a part of Statamic that really isn't massively documented, and that's not necessarily to criticize Jack, Jason, or Jesse, because at the end of the day, this is the type of stuff that you would only really be using if you are doing anything particularly advanced, and if you're doing anything advanced enough to justify this, you should really be able to, work this type of stuff out yourself. But where I'm up to now is I've built the plugin, or the add-on, that handles a lot of the code required to hook in the custom publish form. We are using a MySQL database to store the content, mainly because I haven't had a chance to look at how we could use the file driver system within Statamic version 2, and I'm kind of unsure whether it's really worth spending that much time, considering that version 3 is just around the corner. So basically, where I'm up to now is I've got it printing out. There are roughly about 160 entries at the moment in the announcements, which obviously you wouldn't want to particularly have printing out or being returned on a page without pagination. However, custom publish forms do not have pagination built in, because we are using custom functionality. A lot of the niceties that come with using collections don't exist. So what I need to do is have a look at how the gents have built the collection within Statamic to really understand how to structure my tags file. Now, this is a really great way if you ever get stuck with anything in Statamic and the documents don't help. It's quite rare because Jack and the team have done a phenomenal job on the documents, but there will still be times that methods and other functionality isn't documented. So being able to jump into the actual code itself is a really valuable skill. So what I'm looking at doing at the moment is I've got three dummy announcements. I'm just going to quickly go into my file and I'm just going to undo a lot of what I've been playing around with, just so you can see exactly how I am working with this at the moment. So let's just quickly refresh this, and you'll see that we're getting two. Now there are, if we remove this and we just change this method to all, you'll see that we have three announcements. So as I said, you kind of really do need to have a fairly good understanding of Laravel. At the moment we're working within a model. I won't go into too much detail on this. It's not something that you would typically deal with in Statamic because a lot of it is done by Statamic. But what we have here is we have a model called announcement. That model is just a bog standard, sort of model with the fillable fields within the field type set to be fillable. So things like title, slug, type, date, and file. Type is whether it's a result or a presentation or an announcement. The date is obviously when it was published, which is an important thing, and the file is also an important one because that is a document which is released to the stock exchange, and we also need to host that particular document on our website for compliance reasons. So we have using the Eloquent model class from Laravel's Illuminate. We then are extending that with a class called announcement because the custom publish add-on that I've built is called announcements. And if we just go back to tags, you can see what we're effectively doing is we are calling the model and we're saying give us all the data from the database, and then we are returning it through Statamic's parse loop method, which gives you the ability to, as it says, iterate over the data and parse the tag pair contents for each within scoped values. Now that sounds complicated. Effectively all it means is that when you do the tag pairs in Statamic, so you're probably more used to seeing, let's move this video out of the way just so I can actually see what I'm doing. Let's move it down here. What you are probably more used to seeing is something like, let's create a little bit of front matter, and let's say we are going to have, let's use an example that Jack uses, or Jack tends to use. So animals, we're going to call it name dog. Actually, let's call it Luna, which is my golden retriever, who you might hear during this. Species is a dog. And then we've also got my mum's dog over at the moment, and his name is Milo, and he is also a dog. Now, what you might have is a tag pair, as you've probably seen, is this, and then you can echo out name, and I'm not going to go through that right now, but that would obviously then echo out Luna and Milo. If we were to put that in a unordered list, and then just that would effectively print it out as a list. It could be Luna is a species, and that would print out Luna is a dog and Milo is a dog. Let's say if we had another animal, and let's just call it mittens, and we say species is a cat. That would then add mittens is a cat. Really, really basic data structure in Statamic, in particular in Antlers, and effectively parse loop basically says grab all the data out of the database and parse it as a loop. So that all that is literally doing is, in that example, we might have announcements, and we could then go title, and that will loop through everything. And if you look at where is there it is, you can see, let's get rid of that was just me playing around with something. You can now see that you've got announcements, and we are outputting title and the file to download. And I'll just quickly refresh to show you that the as posts did nothing. You can see that we have each of those files, but they're all the same file, which is why it's not changing, but we've got dummy announcement, another dummy announcement, and an even older announcement. What I need to do is to try and work out how to paginate this. So what we are going to do is we are going to go into collection tags. Now, collection tags is the file that Statamic uses. It's the class Statamic uses to handle the logic of any collection tags. So a collection tag, of course, would be something like collection. There's two different ways of doing this. You might have the way that I typically do it, which is collection from, say, animals, and then you close that collection. Or if you sometimes do it that way, where you have a colon, you then also need to do it that way, which is why I don't typically do it that way. I prefer the more tidy, sort of use of from. So you've only got the / collection at the end of the tag. So if we look at this now, as I say, it's kind of crucial to understand how object-oriented PHP in order to be able to do this. So we have the class, and the class is extending. We also have a series of protected values. So things like collection, paginated, limited, offset, paginated data, and total results. A lot of these are to do with information that's being passed back from the collection tags. And basically one of the key parts is understanding how the base tag works. So the key things I need to work out how to do, I need to be able to use, let's have a quick look, let's just go rid of this. Ideally, I would like to be able to say limit equals, let's say 10, paginate equals true, and then maybe even as use as. And the reason for that would be if we have no results, we want to be able to go if no results. Just quickly come down and go end if. We want to be able to go li and say sorry, no result, no announcements found. Something like that. Not necessarily that, but it's extremely unlikely that that's ever going to happen. But we then want to be able to go listings. Let's just change that to listings, just so it's plural. And we'll close that out. And then we want to be able to go paginate. And I think it's paginate. If you've never done this before, this is effectively the same thing as you can find in the documentation. Collection, pagination. So you can see here we've got if no results, posts, and paginate. So in my instance, it's listings. You'll also notice that I tend to top off my ifs as end ifs, mainly because I hate that. I would rather be able to say end posts and end paginate and end collection, but that's just that is just me. But so. On that basis, we would actually move, if this is working how we want it to, we would move those to there, because these would be happening here. That would not be an li, that would be a p tag. Just bump that back there, bump that there. And pagination should go there. Right. Now, if we come back here, there'll be a problem. Which is that it will be duplicating the ULs several times. In fact, it's not even doing that because it's just missing an S off the end there. You will see that it returns absolutely nothing because I'm not actually asking it to sanitize. Let's just go li and just cut that out. And we'll go a file and download. And that just replicates what we were doing before. Title, file, sanitize. This probably won't work anyway because we now have it as listings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say yeah. Okay, let's leave that for the time being. So that is ultimately what I want to try and get it to. So in order to do that, I need to get my tags file to effectively replicate the collections tag. Now, I'm not going to do the whole thing on the stream. It'd probably take too long. But I just want to show you how I read the code to be able to work out how to do things. So we can see here the index within a tag is what happens if you just put sort of announcements in the case of the announcements tag or the collection in the name of, in the case of collection. So you can see here, for example, it maps to the collection tag. So the first thing that Statamic does when you write collection is it will check to see if you've appended any parameters, particular from, folder, and use. If you have, it will then return the. It will then go off and it will collect using this collect, which is a protected function within the actual document, within the same file, and yeah, brains of the operation. We'll go into it a little bit more in a minute. It passes through the collection name. If it isn't, it then goes and gets the data for the collection from the context. What this basically means is that if you have a variable within your YAML data or your front matter or your markdown file, which has a name of collection, it will go off and get that information and assign it to it. Finally, if it then double checks and says if collection is an instance of a content collection, then return again collect, or pass through the collection to the collect function. Now what's happening here is it's basically saying if you have a from, folder, or use, it will go off automatically. It will try and find that collection, and if it finds it, it will return the data from the collect function. Next thing is it then goes off and it will check the context of the page. If you don't know that, if you've ever used the dump tag and you've seen all the information that's put onto the page, that is the context. And it will see whether the value that is associated with collection is actually an instance of content collection, which I think, if I remember right, is it's either, no, they don't mention it there. My gut reaction is that that is probably a wrapper for it'll be a wrapper for Laravel's collection. It will have a couple of additional methods added. So content collection extends data collection. Data collection is a factory class, if I remember right, or an abstract class that extends. It will extend Laravel collection and add a number of functionality. That's not hugely important right now. If it isn't a instance of content collection, for example, your collection tag is equal to I don't know, a particular string, then it will return the string. So on that basis, what we do is, because we are calling it from, it will immediately trigger this. So we want to have a look at collect. If we scroll down, we can see protected function collect, and it accepts a parameter of collection, which is, as we can see here, either a collection name string, array of collection names, or a content collection. So in our instance, it's going to be a collection name string that we're passing through. So we can see it says collection equals this get collection, and it passes in the name of the collection. Okay, so we can see get collection is going to be, yep, here we go, it is down here. So just to quickly go through and make sure we're not missing anything. Once it's done that, it will then double check the locale. We're not using locale, so that's not important, and it will then convert taxonomy terms to actual taxonomy terms. Again, we're not using taxonomy terms. All that really does is it checks the whether the supplement taxonomy's value is true, and if it is, it then appends the supplement taxonomies to the collection. This filter is I think it's a hook where you, I'm guessing here, but I imagine it's probably a hook where it checks for any filters and applies them if you have created them. And it says if this collection is empty. By the way, I absolutely love this check. It is a full English sentence, which is what we should always be trying to achieve. So if this collection is empty, then return, and passing the results is basically just to pass back the data as an empty array, and then Statamic will tell the template that there are no results, and that would result in that being triggered. So then returns this output, and output is collection tags output. Is that a output? Here we go. So always have a look through, always see if you can try and find the function. If not, it may be a method of the class, the parent class. So for the time being, let's come back up here, and we were looking at get collection. So the first thing it does is it then goes and grabs the collection. So if a content collection has been passed in directly, we already have what we need, and then that will go and get an instance of content collection, which is probably what we're going to be doing. If it is filtering by the taxonomy, we can go and get what we need. That would be if we were, 1 second. Yeah, that would be if we were using a taxonomy to filter what we were doing. Otherwise, we will get all the entries from the specified collection name. Sorry, 1 second. Right, so basically, Now, there's a chance I might need to look into if it's possible to turn our content into an instance of content collection. But for the time being, let's skip that. Entry function, collections helper ensure it's array. That probably would help. And if it's in array, collections, collection handle, exclude not from, not folder. Use. That is just basically making sure that we don't pass anything in. And if we say collections, collection doesn't exist, and return where collection, the collection, now that is, I think, yeah, we don't need those. Get collection, realistically that should be being triggered, which is a instance of content collection. Don't need taxonomy, don't need taxonomy collection, don't need taxonomy collection from URI. Get collection when multiple terms exist doesn't apply. Get collection, okay, output. So, like I said, what I'm looking for at the moment is I'm trying to find out how Statamic handles the output as and things like the limits and the paginated side of things. So realistically, how we handle the content collection stuff, I'll have to have a look at that later. However, it appears that the key one here is actually output. So we can see here that it is getting the parameter of as and assigning it to as, and where is as used? It's used here. So if this, so let's have a look. Grouping by date requires some pretty different formatting, so we'll try and catch this early on and do something separate. We are not going to be doing that. Yeah, we're not going to be doing that. Yeah, this is sometimes what happens when you go through the source code. You catch jacking that out where it obviously hasn't been done. So that is not relevant to us. That's just I'm doing something early. So if this is paginated, how is paginated handled? So paginated would be coming from probably a check somewhere. It might even be within tags. So it's an abstract class of tag. Let's just quickly double check. Go to the definition of it. Is parse loop, parse loop results, that's scope. Form open, get attribution string, that's not what we're looking for. I think, I might be completely wrong here, but pagination is probably coming from Laravel. Here we go, sorry, paginate. Okay, so, yeah, no limit, no pagination. If this is paginated true, so if this limits, okay, right, so what it's effectively doing is it's checking for if it's paginated and if we have a limit. So if there's no limit, it just returns because we don't want to paginate and we also don't want to screw around with anything. So if it is paginated, we return true. We get the total number of results and the total number of entries in this collection. We can do that directly from Laravel. Page is an integer. Request get the page 1 offset. Okay. Interesting. Okay. So, for some reason, Jack, Jason, and Jesse have effectively built a bit of a wrapper around Laravel's length aware paginator, so I'm going to have to be careful with that. We can see that they are pulling out the pagination data and putting it through there. Okay, where is output? Okay, so if it's paginated as, so as is either that or it's as entries. Data, this collection, pagination, merge the arrays and then pass the data. It's not paginated, but we can still nest inside scope key if it's specified again. That's not relevant. So this is the key bit for us here. Filter's not relevant. To do sort, don't necessarily need sort. Get total results. Get collection name. Here we go. Limit. So limit equals get int limit. Limit is either equal to 0 or it's collection count. Get bulk paginate. Here we go. So the paginate function only inits if we have limit, which makes sense because you wouldn't be paginating if you didn't apply the limit. And that then passes through to the paginate function. Don't need group by date. Don't need anything to do with that. Okie doke. So what I've now established is that there are functions specifically for limits, for paginate, and for the from. These are the three things I need to replicate. So what I'm going to do is I am now going to go away and I'm going to have a look at seeing if I can try and implement these. But I mean, effectively, like I said, what I wanted to do with this was I just wanted to be able to demonstrate to you how I read code, how I look at trying to solve problems with things where they're not documented. Obviously, like I said, you do kind of need to have a fairly good understanding of object-oriented PHP, Statamic, and Laravel to do it with Statamic. But hopefully this has helped. It is probably just me mumbling to myself, but if it kind of helps click anything, then that will have done its job. But otherwise, I will see you all at some point in the future.